Okay, guys. Um, I realized in my last video that I forgot to show you how to determine the oxidation number of the elements in a polyatomic ion, which it's really no different than what I showed you on the last video, but I still wanted to do a couple of examples with you because there are some on your practice work as well as on your quizzes, practice one quiz on quizzes. So, um, I wanted to show you how to do a couple of examples with polyatomic ions. Remember that in our last video, I didn't want to make another video and do it all, so I just thought I would add this little short video to the one that's already there. Remember in our last video, we talked about how a compound like water, its overall charge is 0. So again, this is a compound. So then if it's a compound, it's a neutral compound. Its overall charge is 0, so the charges of the elements in that compound have to add up to be 0. Remember we said oxygen is normally -2, and so since there's two oxygens, or I'm sorry, two hydrogens, and that means each hydrogen has to be +1. So that gives us a +2 for the hydrogen, a -2 for the oxygen, which gives us a 0 for the compound. Okay, so you're going to do polyatomic ions much the same way. For example, let's say that we have the sulfate ion. Okay, so sulfate is SO4 with a -2 charge. Okay, well we know then that oxygen is -2 normally, and so 4 oxygens gives us -8. Well, there's only one sulfur. So what does that one sulfur have to be to give us an overall charge of this sulfate ion of -2? Well, that sulfur has to be +6. +6 plus -8 gives us -2. So that tells us the sulfur is +6. Each oxygen is -2. Okay, so that's how you get the oxidation number for ions, or for elements in a polyatomic ion. So what I wanted to do now is I wanted to look at, again, one of your example problems that are on your practice sheet or your practice work for today. So again, this is your assigning this assignment right here on Google Classroom for day 31-32, assigning oxidation numbers and identifying oxidizing and reducing agents. So I wanted to look at the very last one on this handout. So we have FeOH3 plus ClO minus yields FeO42 minus plus Cl minus. And again, that is Cl with a -1 charge. So that is not chlorine the element, but it is chlorine the ion, and its charge is already given, so we have that. So now we have all these other things. We have a compound here, which we know its overall charge has to be 0. So, again, I'm just going to put parentheses on that. We know it has to be 0. Well, when we look at OH, OH we know has a charge of -1. Since there's 3 of those, that means that's a -3. So that means that iron has to be +3. Since there's one iron, that iron has to be +3. Okay, so now we know the OH, each one is -1, overall a -3 charge, so iron has to be +3. But notice that OH is a polyatomic ion. Okay, well we know that polyatomic ion OH is -1. All right, so how do we get -1 with this oxygen and hydrogen? So basically, we know oxygen is normally -2. Well, this hydrogen then must be +1. The oxygen is -2, the hydrogen is +1, so -2 plus +1 gives us an overall charge of -1, and that's the oxidation number of hydroxide is -1. Another way that you can look at this, well, okay, we have one iron, which is +3. We have 3 hydrogens, which is +3. Okay, well then 3 oxygens at -6 would give us -6. So +3 and +3 is +6 plus the -6 gives us the overall charge of 0 of the compound. So again, you can look at the charge of the polyatomic ion in that compound individually and say, okay, OH is -1. So this means since oxygen is -2, hydrogen must be +1. Or you can look at it in terms of the whole compound and what do the charges of all those elements have to be to give you the overall charge of 0 for that compound. Okay, when we look at ClO, guys, that is another polyatomic ion, and its charge is -1. So if oxygen is -2, then what does that chlorine have to be? That chlorine has to be +1 to give us a -2 overall, or to give us a -1 of this ion overall as being -1. So Cl is +1, O is -2 to give us a -1 of this ion. This FeO4 is also a polyatomic ion, so we're going to put parentheses around it. Its overall charge is -2. So again, we know oxygen is -2. So 4 -2s will give us a -8. Okay, again, this charge of this ion is -2. So what added to -8 gives us -2? Well, that's +6. Since there's only one iron, then that means that one iron is +6. Okay, so we can see here our oxygen did not change in any of these. Our iron went from +3 to +6, and our chlorine went from +1 to -1. Okay, so then what this means, again, we want to identify the oxidizing and reducing agents. Well, iron went from +3 to +6, so iron was oxidized, okay, because its charge went up. This means it lost electrons. It was oxidized. So if iron was oxidized, then this compound that has iron in it is the reducing agent. Okay? Now we see the chlorine went from +1 to -1. So it was reduced. Its charge went down. It was reduced. So if it was reduced, then this ion that this chlorine was in is our oxidizing agent. Remember that, I don't know what I'm trying to type there. Remember that your substance that was oxidized, okay, that compound is the reducing agent, and your substance that was reduced, that ion here is our oxidizing agent. So FeOH3 is our reducing agent, ClO minus is our oxidizing agent, and then we have all the charges here. So again, I wanted to go over that with you, not only as another example, which I've already done 2 or 3 examples in the other video that you're supposed to watch, but also I hadn't really gone over determining the charge of the elements in a polyatomic ion, and if you have a polyatomic ion in a compound. And again, you're going to have questions. Not only are you going to have to do that with polyatomic ions on number 7 and 8 on this handout, but you also have to, there's going to be several questions on your quizzes quiz for Monday and Tuesday on this practice quiz right here, practice quiz 1, that you're going to have to be able to determine the charge of elements in a polyatomic ion. So I wanted just to do an example or 2 of that with you so that you would know and wouldn't feel like you had no idea what to do. Please let me know if you have any questions. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.